Welcome back. Yesterday, auto giant Stellantis announced plans to move production of its Jeep model from Brampton to the U.S. Now, the company will invest billions of dollars south of the border. So what does this mean for Canada's auto sector and Canadian jobs? David Adams, president of Global Automakers of Canada, joins us now with more. It's good to have you. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
So I take it this is disappointing news for you to hear that this plant, or the operations of some of it at this plant, is being moved to Illinois. Were you surprised at all?
Well, at the outset, I should be clear that the association that I run does not represent Stellantis or the other Detroit-based automakers, but I think the principle applies regardless of automaker. And while not necessarily surprised, certainly disappointed, I guess. I think that would be characterize the mood of most, I think, in the auto sector with the announcement, yesterday's announcement.
The statement from Stellantis didn't really touch on this, but how much of this move and this decision do you think is coming from pressure from the Trump administration?
Well, look, I think all automakers here, all five of them, have been under pressure for months now to repatriate manufacturing back to the United States. But I think the reality is that these decisions are long-term decisions. They're made, over the course of a number of years. They're not made, at the flick of a switch or flip of a coin. So, it's obviously, as I say, disappointing, but I think this is what the president had intended with the application of the tariffs, and his focus on trying to bring manufacturing back to the United States. Will others follow? I think the longer there's continued uncertainty and the longer we don't have a trade agreement in place that deals with the tariffs, it just becomes that much more challenging for everyone.
Obviously, this has been a tough go for a lot of workers out of this Brampton plant, right? The production in that plant was paused back in February. It was temporarily paused at the time. Stellantis said in its statement that it does still have plans for the Brampton plant. Do you know anything about that, or are you optimistic that maybe there could still be some production coming out of that plant in the future?
Well, look, I mean, I think there's always hope. And I think you hit on the key point, though. It's very challenging for the workers that are in a precarious situation, and not only the workers in the plant, but also, those in the broader community, not only the supplier community, but the community around the plant that rely on the plant being operational for their ongoing sustenance and whatnot. So it's always a challenge when we hear this kind of news, but I think any announcement that I've heard out of Stellantis has always said that there is a place for the Brampton assembly facility in their larger plan. So let's hope that that's the case.
Right. And Stellantis also said it is still investing in Canada, putting some money into a plant down in Windsor. How optimistic are you with that news from Stellantis that there will still be production coming out of Canada?
Well, look, I think we can only control what we can control. And I think the point that we've been emphasizing, I think the whole auto industry has been emphasizing to the federal and the provincial governments, that there are things, policy decisions and whatnot, that both levels of government can make that can either reduce the barriers to trade, reduce the regulatory complexity, help assist in easing the burden on automakers as we're dealing with this particular tariff challenge, which, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of control over. So I think it's up to our federal and provincial leaders to undertake those initiatives that are within their control to allow the auto industry to continue to compete at its best it can, given the current circumstances.
Yeah, I take your point that there's some policy decisions that can be made, but you did say off the top that there's going to be this uncertainty in the auto market until there's some kind of trade deal with the U.S. in place. What kind of trade deal do you think we would need to fix these kind of issues that we're seeing?
Well, we need, for one, we just need a deal. And that's not to suggest that we should be taking any deal, because I think that in the end of the day, we want a deal that works for both countries. And I think for Canada, the auto industry has been very clear that we really do need to go back to an environment where there aren't any tariffs. Our industry has been operating for the last 60 years, where Canada and the U.S. have been building vehicles not for one another, but actually together with one another in terms of suppliers supplying parts and components from both sides of the border that would go into vehicles that would be built on the other side of the border, whether that's Canada or the US. That relationship has worked well, and it's not worked just well for Canada, it's worked well for the United States. And I think that's another message that we're trying to emphasize with our colleagues in the US, that look, having a trilateral free trade agreement in North America actually helps the U.S. industry compete in a much better way than it would if it was just by itself. So I think we do need a comprehensive trade framework that addresses all of these issues. And if there are concerns with Canada or with Mexico, then let's deal with those. But we do need to get an agreement in place that works for all.
I know you are trying to be optimistic when talking about, Canada staying competitive in the auto manufacturing sector. Are you optimistic about that, or are there some very real concerns that you have about the future of auto manufacturing here?
Well, hope always springs eternal, but I think if you look at Canada, we do have a lot of, and especially if we look at where the industry is transitioning to, we do have a lot of factors that play into our favor, I think, as a nation. If we look at our critical minerals, for instance, and I think those are important to not only the automotive industry in Canada, but if you're the United States, it's important for their military and the defense industry. So that's hugely important. I think these are some of the levers that our government needs to sort of think outside the box a little bit and figure out how we can bring all of these things to bear in the discussions that we have with our friends in the United States to ensure that we can put together an agreement that makes sense. So, we've had a collaborative, constructive auto industry between our two nations, as I say, for more than 60 years, where that's been operating on a free trade basis. Will it change moving forward? Yeah, I think it probably will change, but that's not to suggest that it's going to cease to exist. I do kind of think that's just a bit of rhetoric that's maybe been used to try and drive the negotiations towards a conclusion.
Obviously, the idea here is for things to be, at least Donald Trump's idea here is for things to be made in America, right? Bringing these plants back to America so that everything is made there. They don't have to cross any borders. We've seen how Stellantis is handling this. I believe GM was another one that is handling it in similar ways. Are there other companies like maybe Toyota or Honda that seem to be handling the tariffs a little bit better? And why is that? Like, are there different companies that you see out there that are doing something that's a little better for Canada?
Sure. My two manufacturing members, Toyota and Honda, they're the largest manufacturers in Canada, and largely they've been weathering the tariff storm, well to this point. They're continuing to produce. I don't have any layoffs in effect or anything like that. To a certain extent, it has to do with the product that is coming out of the different assembly facilities. But I think regardless of manufacturer, the longer this uncertainty goes on, the longer we don't have a trade agreement in place, then obviously for all manufacturers, the more challenging it becomes.
Okay, David Adams, president of Global Automakers of Canada. I appreciate you joining us today. Thanks so much.